institutions. It could happen within research laboratories, etc.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mafe. Thank you for this wonderful lecture. We have a couple of questions for you, so we'll take them very quickly.
Yes.
The first question says, one of the challenges of collaborative research is balancing individual priorities and to remain focused on shared goals. So can you speak to that, knowing that collaborating researchers have different motivations? Are there any challenges?
I touched on one or two of them earlier. When a research protocol is submitted, the researcher must show that he or she is not in any way, does not have any conflict of interest, i.e. being sponsored or being favored in one way or the other by the applicant. Number two, when such a person finds himself or herself in the Health Research Ethics Committee that is considering such protocol, such a one should excuse or should be excused from deliberation on that protocol. Then number three, incentives that are being provided by the funders should not be such that will override the autonomy of the research participants. I hope those are some of them.
Okay, thank you. This question from Isaac says, how do we deal with conflict of interest among ethics committee members, considering that the researchers may buy them over prior to review?
There's no way. You see, you have people of high integrity in health research ethics committees. And it's not just, it's composed of lawyers, administrators, community representatives, nurse, medical doctors, scientists, and so on. So different interests. You cannot, cajole or, get them under your armpits. And the first thing in the process of reviewing a protocol, the chairman announces, we have this protocol for review. Each one of you, please state whether you have conflict of interest. Because there are implications, there are sanctions. If it is found that you have conflict of interest and you didn't declare. And then there are usually whistleblowers. Even the protocol may indicate without the participant, the researcher, knowing, in writing the list of collaborators or researchers that will participate in such research, you can detect it from there, or from people who are within the same institution, if it's that institution, that such a person who is on the review board is part and parcel of this study. So there are mechanisms to detect. If in event it is reported that such a one was allowed to participate, there are sanctions. Yeah, so usually we screen out such issues or such challenges.
Okay, thank you. Nelson is saying that there is a certain state in northeast Nigeria that recently constituted an ethics committee that will be in charge of monitoring the human and animal research within the state. And then you have a researcher in that state who has obtained ethical clearance from your committee. That isn't it a conflict of interest or a conflicting role for a researcher to have to obtain the ethical clearance from you when they have an ethics committee domiciled in their state?
I think I mentioned on this earlier. Number one, the person who is asking the question should tell us, did they have more than 3 sites for that study? If it is more than 3 sites, the local or institutional rec has no power to consider or approve such protocol. Number two, what category of registration are they holding? Does the registration of that rec, does it qualify to vet such a protocol? These are things we need to know. So if they're not qualified, they go straight to national.
Okay, another question is, there are several ethical questions that have been raised by the production of the COVID-19 vaccine. And some of them include vaccine access and equity, use of vaccine passports, and then clinical trial conduct. What is your opinion on rapid vaccine production and the use of clinical trials for that?
Well, there's nothing like that. I can't understand what you mean by rapid vaccine production. There's nothing like rapid vaccine production because there are stages you must go through for clinical trials before you can conduct the clinical trial. The science must be proven. And this is looked into by the Food and Drugs Administration in Nigeria and NAFDAC. Elsewhere is now FDA. If they don't accept and approve, they cannot go to the first phase. Yeah? So that is number one. Number two, you cannot talk of anything. I mean, there are stages that you have to go through, and there are regulatory agencies that have to give the needed approvals for it to go forward. Sorry, what was the other thing that the person said? Can you repeat the question again, please, quickly?
So, are we doing?
Okay, was saying, what is your view on
Jade, can you hear
rapid
me?
vaccine production and use of clinical trials for rapid vaccine production?
Can anybody hear me?
Well, for you to produce vaccine,
Yes,
it's
we
first
can.
in the laboratory.
So,
You don't
why is
jump
it
to
going
human
on the old?
beings. So when the science has been proven, as so many parameters that have to be checked on this science thing by the Food and Drug
It's like an
Administration.
But
intro.
it's
He
showing me
ought
the
to
old
stop
one.
it now. Yeah, he
Certified
ought to stop it now. He's waiting for participants to join. It's an
Then
intro.
it goes
Say
there.
it again.
So there's something like rapid.
I said it's an
So
intro.
what
He's
we
waiting
I
for
think they
people
mentioned
to
something
join
about
before he
the
stops it.
vaccine not being accessible to developing countries. That's unethical. That is highly unethical, and that's what happened during the COVID-19 experience. They participated in some of the development, but when the vaccines were produced, the cost of it was beyond our wherewithal. But then we are guarding against that, even as at now. It should not be. It's unethical.
I am just testing my sound. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Let me just test my screen sharing. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, but it's
Yes.
not on the screen. Okay, beautiful. Perfect.
Great. And then just let me know when you'd like me to get started. I feel like we'll probably give it a few minutes for people to join.
Yes. We give a few minutes for people transitioning from other meetings. So 2 minutes after the hour, we should be. To say hi before you start.
Yeah, I'll do a little introduction before I get started.
That's what I'm saying. I wanted to say hi before you start. I will do an introduction once it's a few minutes after the hour. We'll just give a few minutes for people transitioning from other meetings. Then I'll do an introduction. Then you take it up.
Sounds great.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for good evening, depending on where you are. And please welcome to our monthly webinar. My name is Eche Ezanoloe. I'm the director for the Center for Translation and Implementation Science here at the University of Nigeria, and we are very happy this month to go to an area that we consider as very, very important for research, which is how you manage your grant, how you administer your grant. And today to speak on this expert area is Nicole Joyce. Nicole Joyce is the Director of Sponsored Research, Business Intelligence, System and Innovation Strategies for the University of California, San Diego. She has been a research administrator professional for more than 12 years. She's currently serving as a core training lead on a G11 grant funded by the National Institute of Health, which is building research administration and infrastructure for the HIV research at the University of Nigeria by developing a training and corresponding infrastructure for the University of Nigeria so that we can improve on the research that we do. Nicole graduated cum laude with a Bachelor's of Art in Corporate Communication and a minor in Women's Studies. She holds a master's degree in Business Administration and recently received the National Council of University Research Administrators Outstanding New Research Administrator Award. Before you think that she's all about research administration, I want to share a few things about Nicole that you should remember in case you ever meet her, that she is a certified Six Sigma Black Belter. So don't play around her if you're not black belt or if you're like me. Nicole does reside in Naperville, Illinois with her husband and son. When she's not trying to shift the landscape of research administration, she enjoys travel, reading, and kayaking. And one of the most recent things she learns now is how to learn Igbo language. So she's improving. I think we gave her a C last time. And hopefully the next time she's in Nigeria, she will immerse in the Igbo language and have an A. So please join me in welcoming Nicole as she goes through grant administration and management. Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that warm introduction. And thank you all for having me today. It's such an honor, such a pleasure to be here to talk to you about the passion, but not just the passion, but the practicality of research administration and research management and finding your role within this research enterprise and this landscape. As Dr. Ezenolue mentioned, my name is Nicole Joyce. I do work at the University of California, San Diego, and my area of expertise is less on signing contracts or negotiating contracts or managing the grants. My expertise lies more in the operational management of the research enterprise. So my focus is really around the business systems, the training, the development, the communication infrastructure, the business intelligence. So all of the operational necessities from an administrative standpoint that help researchers and research managers and administrators do their job. So that's sort of the lens that I'm talking to you through today. And I should say, Ndeo no keduka imere, to practice my Igbo. I'm still practicing, and everyone's very kind as I practice with them. So my goal today is that by the end of this webinar, you will feel energized about research and that you will be able to articulate why research management plays an absolutely critical role in supporting and expanding successful research programs in Nigeria. The topics that we're going to cover in order to meet this goal is what is research and why is it important? I always think it's really nice to start at the highest level just to remember to give ourselves some context about what we're talking about this landscape before we dive in a little bit deeper on specific topics. And that hopefully will invigorate some of the passion, especially when we talk about why research is important. And what is research management? I like to refer to this as the most important profession you never knew existed, because it is absolutely critical. Research cannot be done without solid research management. And that we're going to talk about why it's so important. And again, I hope that this taps into some passion and gets you all very excited about this field. And then gets you thinking about, how do you find your role? What role might you have? I understand that I'm probably speaking to a mixed audience here. Some of you might be administrators, some of you might be researchers, some of you might be faculty and teachers, some of you may be students embarking on your career, some of you may be clinicians. So because I have such a mixed audience, I want you to think about how this can relate to your role and how can you engage with the research administration enterprise in this whole life cycle. And, even where you start might not be where you end. That role might also evolve. And if anybody knows me, they will know that I don't like to just talk. I really like action. I really want whatever I present to be meaningful, but I want you to have something that you can take away from this webinar today that will be your call to action, some way that you feel that you can engage, that you can take action, that you can participate in contributing to research, the research landscape, the research enterprise, in whatever role you hold. And if you don't hold a role yet, it will get you interested enough to take action and to get involved. So let's get started here. Let's talk about what is research and why is it so important? So the kind of dictionary definition of research is investigation or experimentation aimed at the discovery and interpretation of facts, the revision of accepted theories and laws in light of new facts, or practical application of such new or revised theories or laws. And typically, research is either fundamental or applied. It can happen across a variety of fields, whether it's healthcare, technology, environmental, human and social sciences, and it can be conducted in a lab or it can be done in the field. But at its core, research is about solving problems, right? At the very core of research is a problem or a question or a hypothesis, and research seeks to understand and to solve. And seeking solutions is really important. And I'm going to also preface this and say that while my perspective is from operating in the United States of America, I've done my best to do as much research and to tie this into Nigeria as possible. And I will caveat, I'm not an expert in Nigeria, but I am very, what's the right word? I'd say passionate, and I would say interested in trying to make sure that what I talk about doesn't only have a Western lens, that I've tried to see things from the Nigerian perspective. And from that, when we're talking about research and we're talking about it from a Nigerian perspective, and we're talking about seeking solutions, obviously, like any nation, Nigeria faces some challenges. Poverty, so globally ranked, it's 142nd out of 167, according to the Legantim Prosperity Index. From a health perspective, it's the fourth largest HIV epidemic in the world, and 1 out of every 7 babies born worldwide with HIV is born in Nigeria. And then from an accountability standpoint, globally ranked, it's 150 out of 180 on the Corruption Perceptions Index. So why did I choose to highlight these 3 things? It's no way meant to evoke any shame or embarrassment. The point of this is because, again, we need to understand the landscape in which we're operating in. When it comes to poverty, research is absolutely critical to a nation's development. The more you invest in research, the more you support that enterprise. Again, it's about solving problems, and it is there to help a nation develop. So for me, when I see this, I see potential. I see growth. I see the way forward is up. when I talk about health, the reason why I pulled out this example is because I have been fortunate enough to be involved working with Dr. Izianulue and Dr. Ahrens on their efforts. And part of the grant that I'm on, the G11, is to make sure that we're building research administration capacity and infrastructure so that you can go ahead and apply for those grants that will help address the HIV epidemic, which is so critical and so important and very real. And the other thing is accountability. The reason why I picked out accountability is because as you start to move forward in this journey to mature your research in Nigeria, knowing that there's that perception index is going to probably change how you establish certain policies, procedures, and practices within your administrative capacities, especially around compliance. And it may affect how certain organizations choose to engage with research organizations in Nigeria. So it's important to have this awareness because, again, it's about seeking solutions and about knowing that landscape. Research is about solving problems. And those are some of the problems that you will want to address. So there's this relationship between research and higher education. And when we're thinking about solving problems and we're thinking about this national lens and how that might interact on the international community or the global scale, it's only a natural fit that universities and research would go hand in hand. So universities are built around the pursuit of knowledge, of learning, of discovery. And we know that research is directly linked to discovery and innovation and creation and problem solving that benefit society. And it's natural that institutions of higher education would engage in research because this is a true complement to the mission and to the aims of institutions. So essentially, you have inquisitive academics who are going to apply for funding, who are going to receive those awards and those dollars and those naira, and they're going to conduct the research and essentially solve problems. And to tie it into the University of Nigeria, here it is. We can see that in practice as part of the vision statement to create a functional, a globally competitive and research-focused University of Nigeria, which is not an ivory tower, but responsive to the needs of society while delivering world-class education and knowledge. So again, in practicality, here we are seeing that drive to use research as a tool to address the needs of society. So knowing what those are and being able to address those needs. And Nigeria has a ton of potential. So Nigeria has a very large research system with 170 universities. Some are federal, state, private, and the University of Nigeria is one of the oldest. And as of 2019, those universities employed more than 60,000 academic staff. So it's one of Africa's largest producers of scientific research across all disciplines, surpassed only by South Africa and Egypt. And because it's such a young nation, with the median age being around 17, 18, and because it's so populous, the sixth largest country in the world based on population, this gives it such potential to harness that energy, to harness that potential, to harness the research landscape in order, in my opinion, to really become a global player. And I think that's really important for the nation and for the people of the nation. However, in some of the research I was looking at, it has some of the lowest research funding in the world. So you have all this potential, this populous country, you have this large research system, and it is not proportional to the funding and the investment. So what I found was that it was contributing less than 1% of its GDP to research. So again, tons of potential. In my opinion, those gaps are the gaps of potential. That means that it can only get better. And when you look at the top 10 Nigerian universities, you see University of Nigeria is number 7, which is kind of interesting because if you look at the top 10 US research universities, you'll see that UC San Diego is actually number 6. And I know that Dr. Isinulue likes to mention that he sees the University of California, San Diego, and the University of Nigeria as sister schools. And so I just thought this was kind of a nice little parody to show. So why research? Why? Why have all this passion for it? Why take an interest in it? Why help drive your nation in this direction? Because when we harness that science and that technology and that innovation, and we use it as a tool for national development, then the country benefits. And that could benefit from solar energy to stabilize the electricity supply, genomic studies, new therapies, vaccination, health, animal production. There is so much potential. And again, there are so many challenges to be addressed through research. And when you think about research, it doesn't just benefit a nation. Yes, there are national benefits that we've talked about, but there are also institutional benefits. You know, if you get more research funding, you get some funds that can help support the administration. Whenever you have a functioning research enterprise within an institution, you can produce more projects, more publications that can lead to more credibility, more opportunities for the faculty, for the staff, and for the students. There are also lots of community benefits. When you have these research institutions embedded within the community, not only are you providing jobs and creating awareness of local issues, you are also, bringing some credibility and some awareness of that area. And then the individual benefits. Bringing research into a nation, into an institution, into a community also benefits people individually. It creates a source of education, transferable job skills, opportunities for career growth, the ability to contribute to the profession. There's just so many ways that this is multi-beneficial at all layers. So who funds all this research? In just kind of taking a look at the United States, we get our funding from a lot of federal agencies, industry, or for-profit entities, a lot of nonprofit entities, and even from foreign entities. The bulk of the funding comes from the federal government, the United States federal government. And this is just a chart to kind of show you what that distribution amongst our agencies looks like. So a large percentage from the Department of Defense, a large portion from the Department of Health and Human Services, some from the Department of Energy, Space Administration, Science, and other agencies. But that's just kind of give you a landscape of the United States funding. And then who's funding the research in Nigeria? So the information that I was able to find on this is that the GERD survey, so the gross expenditure on research and development, showed that about 46 billion naira at the time in 2009 was probably about 580 million US dollars. So as a share of the GDP, this is only about 2%. And so this was below what the UNESCO and current African Union recommended, which they're recommending about 1% of GDP should be spent on research. And some of the most research activity in Nigeria was sponsored by the Tertiary Education Trust Fund. But I still think that there's a lot of potential there where it might still not yet be meeting the needs. And then the international nonprofits, of course, MacArthur Foundation, endowment funds, foreign allocations, fellowships, donations. So there's still, you can see, very similar funding structures, but it's the proportionality that is different, right? And this is where, again, I hope that passion comes in, because what we care about, we tend to dedicate our energy to, our money to, our effort to. And so hopefully We're building that case so that when the call to action comes, there's a large voice of people who are willing to advocate to why funding is so important and where to find that funding. And just to kind of give you some perspective, this is a stat from UC San Diego. So in our last fiscal year, we received $1.76 billion in research funding. That's about 1.4 trillion naira. So I just kind of do this so that you can see that it is a key focus in the United States of the government to fund research and to fund it heavily. And then at UC San Diego, it is prioritized core to our mission. So we dedicate a lot of time, energy, effort, resources in applying for funding and making sure that we are receiving our awards and that we are managing them properly so that we don't risk losing funding in the future. So just kind of to summarize this section, research is absolutely critical to a country's development. And as we can see, Nigeria has a lot of potential. And research engages institutions of higher education because it leverages the academic, inquisitive pursuit of knowledge in order to seek those creative solutions, to think about things differently. And to solve problems, research has to be well funded. It has to be centrally prioritized by the government. And while there are other funding opportunities available, it should be a key priority of funding for the government. And the appropriate research support must be in place. So let's talk now about what is research management and why is that important? So research management also can go by research administration, grants management, research support, research development. Again, I've said this is the most important profession you never knew existed because researchers and academics and faculty will get a lot of the attention. But as you'll see a little bit later in the webinar, there are so many nuances to being able to apply for the funding, help develop a grant, understand the compliance and regulatory landscape, that you really need a specialized group of individuals to be able to assist researchers because they just don't have the capacity to do it all themselves, especially when they're focused on the science and the results of the science. So according to the National Council of University Research Administrators, or NCURA, they have a nice little handout, the role of research administration. It actually started as a profession in the United States around 1940. This was following World War II. The US federal agencies started entering into agreements with colleges and universities and started to provide them funding. And really, to take this a step further, this was a high interest, especially when it came to the space race and the United States wanting to be the first in space. So they started to invest a lot in science and technology. And because research administration is recognized as a profession, there are requirements, responsibilities, and established standards. Because what they realized is that when the federal government started partnering with colleges and universities and started to give them lots of funding, as those application volume grew and as the complexity of the applications grew, the researchers just didn't have time to focus on all the administrative work, and therefore they needed administrators to assist. But because this is a very specialized profession and a specialized set of knowledge and skills, that's where this profession was born. And administrators can seek out professional certifications and even master level programs in the United States. So why is it important? Well, it's so important because without research management, without research administrators, the scientists really aren't going to be able to focus fully on the science and the creative solutions and applying for different opportunities that will develop their research further. So really, it's about providing that adequate support that directly will affect kind of the overall output and the quality of the research institution. It's specialized. It's a specialized administrative function. There are just certain bodies of knowledge that you have to know about in order to be able to conduct this profession successfully. The quality of that research support in your research management really matters because it will strengthen your research system. If you have a lot of researchers, but they don't have the ability to submit proposals because they need help in writing their grants, putting together the components of their grants, and they just don't have time to do it, it's not going to get done. They're not going to be able to dedicate that effort, especially if they are splitting their time with teaching or clinical work or other things. So the success isn't just about the researchers. And also mismanagement. If you don't know as a scientist, because your job is to be a scientist, if you don't know about the different regulations that are changing all the time, then you might miss something, not intentionally, not because you're a bad person, not because you're trying to do bad things, but because you just made an innocent mistake. You didn't know that form was so important or that deadline had to be met because your mind is focused on other things. So that is why it is so important to have well-trained research administrators. And those managements of that skill, those tasks, that knowledge, really allows the researchers to focus on the work that they're experts at, while the administrators are expert at the administrative pieces. So some of the challenges. So this was a survey in an article, and it talked about the satisfaction in Nigeria with the administrative support in their institution. Time and stress, hiring research staff, proposal writing, planning and implementation of research. The sponsored project's life cycle for a scientist looks different than it does for the administrator. And you can see that there's a certain level of dissatisfaction. So what's contributing to this dissatisfaction? Poor funding, the lack of technological tools, the lack of reliable internet and reliable power sources, the lack of training opportunities, which is what makes our G11 grant so critical. And then that lack of that centralized network. And as part of our G11, that's one of the things we're doing, is trying to establish that centralized network. So you can see that in this life cycle, where someone's identifying those opportunities, what could my research support? What kind of problems could my research fund? And how do I develop that grant? How do I put together all of the components, from writing the science and the scope of work and putting together the budget and writing my own bio sketch and trying to get collaborators, to being able to submit it to the agency and make sure that it doesn't contain certain errors that might make the application be rejected, to any of those post-submission activities. What is it that I need to do in order to provide additional materials to the agency in order to receive my award? Sometimes there's even negotiation in those contracts and those awards to make sure that there are no conflicts with intellectual property or academic freedom. And then being able to actually set up that award, set up the money so that it can be adequately tracked and spent and reported on. Managing those funds so that they are appropriately managed, it is transparent, it is properly treated, so that an agency knows that what you applied to do, you are now doing. And any invoices or reporting, and then whenever the research project is due to end, actually closing out the project and making sure that all of the due diligence is completed and returned to the agency as needed. So you can see that if you're trying to develop a lot of science, having a specialized research administration or research management infrastructure allows you to focus on the science, so that the administrators can focus on those tasks. They can be responsive to the deadlines, because throughout this life cycle, there are a lot of deadlines, things that need to be met on a certain schedule, and those deadlines can be difficult to manage. And then also providing accurate information on regulations, processes, procedures, best practices, being proactive so that the faculty doesn't have to come to you. The research manager is the one who is being proactive and explaining to the faculty member, it's time for this. This is what we need. This is the proper paperwork. And providing that communication and that rapport. And you need to establish that trust so that you can rely on your administrators and your management in order to do what you need to do when you need to do it. Preparing those proposal applications to request that funding. There's just a lot of little components that go into a grant submission, and it's nice to have someone who is responsible for putting those components together. And reading the solicitations in detail to make sure that whatever is in that call or in that opportunity, the administrator knows and is calling out specifically that guidance for the faculty member to give their application the best opportunity for success. So this is kind of an image that we developed at UC San Diego, and you don't have to be able to read everything in here, but it gives you an overall visual of having to know the expertise of research administration. It has to be both broad, you have to know about a lot of different things, and it has to go deep. You have to know a lot of the nuances pretty intimately. So it can be everything from grant development, accounting and financial management, compliance, policies, procedures and regulations, human resources and academic personnel, technology systems, tools, data analytics and reporting, and even those soft skills with communication, time management. So the expertise that is needed is just vast. And as you can see, if you're also in the lab trying to do your research, and you might also be teaching, and you might also be a clinician, this is a little bit too much to learn in addition to all of those other responsibilities. And there are consequences. There are consequences. You might say, well, so what? Does it really matter? Yes, it does. The consequences of weak research management can be research misconduct and the consequences related to that, wasted resources, both in the lab and in the infrastructure of the institution. There can be audits and findings and fines. There can be the loss of intellectual property if the terms and conditions aren't negotiated well. There can even be the loss of future funding. So if an agency thinks that you've made a misstep, they can actually decide to no longer fund you or to revoke future funding opportunities to your institution. And then there can even be the loss of reputation and credibility, which is incredibly challenging if you are trying to attract the best students, the best faculty, the best researchers, and the best staff to your institution. So essentially, research management capacity and training and development is absolutely critical. You cannot have a successful research enterprise without having successful research management and administrators. So just kind of to provide a summary of that, research management is a specialized profession, and it is a profession with a certain set of standards. Just like being a doctor, just like being an accountant, there are standards. Strong research management enables research by supporting the researchers so they can focus on the science rather than the administrative management and tasks. And strong research management mitigates the risk for researchers and for the institutions through compliance and through those best practices. And training and education and skills building is crucial to developing strong research management. You need specialized training, you need the skills building and the hands-on learning in this profession. and institutions should prioritize and invest in their research management as much as their labs or their equipment. They need to equally provide the tools and the capacity for their research management if they wish to develop research at their institutions. So finding your role and how do you engage? So there are a lot of different roles that make up the research enterprise. You might be a policymaker, could be the sponsor who actually funds the projects. You could be an institution who accepts the funds for the project. You could be the individual faculty researcher who leads the project and is accountable for those outcomes. You could be the student who is being mentored, who wants to go into this field, who wants to contribute to the project, or in contributing to the project, it contributes to their degree. And you can be the administrator who is collaborating and partnering and liaising in order to make sure that all of those policies and procedures and administrative tasks and those deadlines are being met. But whatever your role is, the one thing that matters most is the partnership and is the engagement and is knowing that research is complex and there are many roles and many touch points, no matter who you are and what role or what capacity you serve, but partnership and engagement really does matter. So whether you're directly involved or indirectly involved, collaboration is going to be key. Knowing that you have partners and understanding what their role might consist of. So if you're a scientist, understanding what your administrator's perspective is. If you're an administrator, understanding what the scientist's perspective is. Having that allows you to appreciate and form that trust and those partnerships that makes everything more functional. And these are just a few pictures of our incredible partnerships that we have been lucky enough to have with the University of Nigeria and CTR and with Dr. Aarons and Dr. Eche Izinuloe. And it shows our research administrators and our scientists working together and learning those skills and developing that capacity, because the strength in that collaboration means that now more opportunities are going to become available. There's more credibility there. There are more opportunities for collaboration if you've had a successful collaboration in the past. So whatever your role is important, and it's important that you contribute your expertise and your partnership to the research enterprise. So now is the call to action. I was reading this great book. It was called Beyond Humanitarianism, What You Need to Know About Africa and Why It Matters. And there was this great article, and in it said, as Nigeria goes, so goes Africa. And I thought that is so true, because Nigeria is such a unique country, in my opinion, due to its population and its size, and not just its position within Africa, but its potential position within the world. Is that if Nigeria really can establish and leverage its potential for research, I really do think that it can be a global player. And I think that in being a global leader, Nigeria will have the opportunity to be an African leader. And I also just think that there's so much benefit that if a lot of the issues and the challenges and the problems are solved in Nigeria, it can have a global repercussion in the most positive way. So the call to action is acknowledge any current challenges, but seek sustainable solutions. Advocate for policy change nationally, regionally, and locally. And this is something we do at UC San Diego as well. We try to engage with our sponsors to advocate. We engage with our government to advocate for research, why it's important. And this can even change with the various interests of what is, the most meaningful topic of the time. We saw that whenever it came to COVID-19, that there was an influx of research spending. So you're making sure that there is that partnership and that voice, whether it is national, regional, or locally, make sure those threads are connected. And invest in administrative infrastructure and technology and digital solutions. That's one of the opportunities that I see, is that while the Western world is moving into artificial intelligence, in our work with our Nigerian colleagues, we are seeing that even still some of the basic digital experience and technologies are still wanting. And so knowing that that's the direction that the world in the West is going, and knowing that in order to be a partner, we have to bridge that gap in some way, those investments are going to be very key. Train and educate in knowledge and skills, making sure that people not just have the knowledge of what to do, but they have the skills to actually do it, and have the practice to become confident in what they're doing, so it becomes very familiar. Create and engage in a community and collaborate, because whenever you get a bunch of research administrators together, they almost start speaking another language. It's very interesting. And we saw this even with our trainees, that when we started the training, a lot of what we were saying was very unfamiliar. And then by the end of the training, I passed through the hallway and overheard what I would call the language of research administration being spoken. And it just made me so happy, because that learning had really happened, but also that community was forming. And not just the community in Nigeria or locally in Enugu where we were, but across the nation, across the 6 regions. We now have research administrators in the 6 regions of Nigeria. And now we're working in partnership with NCURA to bring those folks into the global community. And establish those ethical standards and the best practices, because that can really be the downfall that it can either break the trust, or it can build the trust in the relationship with other institutions, with other faculty collaborators, and with sponsors, especially on whether they're going to provide funding now in the future. And that really, those ethical standards and best practices really do contribute to reputation and credibility. It's not to say that mistakes and honest mistakes won't be made, but if you put a lot of checks and balances into the infrastructure, then you're trying to mitigate the risk of anything happening. Maintain what you're doing as a best practice. Try to continuously improve and grow, and seek to scale it. So as your interests grow, then so does your research portfolio. And get involved. These are just a few. I know there are more opportunities to engage in professional organizations, but there is the Nigeria Implementation Science Alliance. There is, of course, CTR, where we're here, the Center for Translation and Implementation Research. There's also engaging in other African institutions, which you might find that some of the topics are more relatable than some of the stuff you would experience in the West, or with research administrators in Japan or in Norway. But there's the Southern African Research and Innovation Management Association, SARMA. Of course, the National Council of University Research Administrators, NCURA. There's also the Society of Research Administrators International, SRAI. The National Organization of Research Development Professionals, or NORDP. So these are just a few, but it's again an example to show you that this really is a global community. It is a profession. There are many people who are engaging in this, and people who are at different places in their research journey, and who can talk to the different roles or the different levels of where you are. And it's important to find that community and to get involved. So just kind of to wrap up all the topics that we've covered in the webinar today, Nigeria has a lot of potential to improve the state of research. And by improving research, it will improve the country, and it will benefit institutions, it will benefit the communities, and it will benefit the individual citizens. There are many ways to contribute and engage in research, and finding the right partners and advocating that research be a top priority for investment will be important. And when I say research, I'm including research management and administration in that as well. You cannot have one without the other. And while researchers will draw most of the attention, research management should not be overlooked, and it is fundamental and critical to the success. So with that, I will invite some questions, and I will say Daulu and thank you for letting me present. And it looks like we have a few minutes where I can take some questions from all of you. I think we might have.
Thank you, Nicole. And we are going to go to some of the questions that are in the Q&A. And please continue to put your question in the Q&A. That's a better place than the chat, so that we can differentiate those questions that need to be included. Since I have the microphone, I will ask my question first. And, one of my questions that I get asked a lot is, from what discipline do people who choose a career pathway in research administration come from? Because I noticed that really there are a variety. People have come from sciences, social sciences, law, accounting. So is there a limit, a pathway for a career in research administration and management?
That's a great question. Really, anyone can be a research administrator. It's really about the transferable skills. And as you've mentioned, we have seen people come from, accounting and finance. We've seen people come from communications. We actually have one who came from the fashion industry, believe it or not. And really, you can come from science. You could have been a researcher. You could have, studied computer science. So really, anyone can become a research administrator. And this is what's kind of unusual about it. Because research administration is a very specialized profession that was born out of need, there are no undergraduate programs that exist where you could go to school in higher education and get a degree in research administration, not at the undergraduate level. So most people will fall into it by accident because they had some transferable skills. Maybe they had an interest in working with higher education. Maybe they had an interest in research. And then they stay because they love it. And they've now learned a very marketable skill because there are institutions all over the world. And research is so prevalent that now, once they learn that skill set, they can contribute to institutions. So really, it could be anybody. And once you're in that field, there are a ton of certifications, professional organizations, and master programs. I think some folks even get their PhDs. So it really is a viable career path.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So I don't know if you want to go through the questions yourself, or do you want me to read them out? Which one is preferable?
Let's see if I can read them out here. So the first one is research administration and management is a moving spectacle. Ooh, excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, thank you. So research administration and management is a moving spectacle. How can you keep pace with the day-to-day changes? That's a great question. I think many people would say it can be a challenge to keep pace with the day-to-day changes. And that's part of what makes this field unique. It is really challenging because things do change and they continue to evolve. And that's due to the nature of the work. If you think about how science is always kind of breaking new boundaries, breaking new grounds, suddenly, regulatory or compliance has to respond. How do we deal with these situations? So keeping pace with the day-to-day changes, I would say from a more kind of tactical perspective, is really organization, keeping yourself organized and trying to have a good understanding of the life cycle and the needs and the deadlines that are happening kind of day to day. From a larger perspective, it's nice if you have the ability for someone to carve out either a piece of their job or it becomes a job in itself, that they kind of make sure they know what's happening in the policy landscape, can read and interpret the policy, and then see what that means and be a little more proactive. But unfortunately, there's not an easy answer for keeping the pace. It really can rely on you and your organizational and time management abilities and the abilities to understand what's coming, what challenges, and how you need to respond. And sometimes if it gets beyond a certain capacity, it might be that you need more help or more specialized roles.
So we still have 8 minutes, so I think you can pick and choose and then respond to them.
Let's see here. Okay, what advice do you have for someone with PhD biochemistry whose most of his research outputs are in basic research but wish to switch to health research? How can that be done, bearing in mind that your publications contribute to the chance of you getting funding? So I'll try to answer this because I'm not necessarily a researcher, and maybe Dr. Ezeanoluwe will have some more input, but I would say that collaborations is probably going to be one of the ways that you could segue. If you can collaborate with somebody where there's a slight crossover, that could be one way to form a partnership and to participate on a grant in order to get that experience that you're seeking and to be part of publications if you're trying to move in that direction.
So I just wanted to add that one of the differences between basic sciences and the health sciences is that most of the times, basic sciences are individual science. So you go into your lab, you focus on your experiment, and you get your stuff done. Most health sciences are not just multidisciplinary, they're actually transdisciplinary in a way that people from different areas come for the research. So when we propose a health science research, you find out that we have people with different specialties. There are people coming in with biostatistics skills. There are people coming in from epidemiology. There are people coming in from implementation science. There are people coming in from basic areas of science. But then there are transferable skills. And Nicole speaks about that. If you notice truly that a well-rounded education in the way it's done should have 50% transferable skills and 50% specific skills, which means if you wanted to switch to any other field, you should be able to switch by converting the other 50%. You should have things like work ethics, things like help you grant management. If you know how to write grant, we always use NIH grant to teach how to write grant. And people say, what about other grants? And I said, if you can submit an NIH grant, every other grant will look like a cakewalk for you. Because of the amount of information that is required on NIH grant. So almost 80% of the skills you learn submitting NIH grant are transferable skills. There'll be 20 that are specific to NIH, but you can use it for British, Canadian, or whatever type of grant that you apply. So if you have a PhD in biochemistry, you are a science major. So there are skill set that you already have. You know how to report experiments. You know how to, so you have some technical skills. The idea is now, okay, with these technical skills, what else do I need to complement it to go forward? So it is focusing on your transferable skills. The challenge is when people don't develop their transferable skills and all they have developed is their specific skills, then it becomes more challenging. It doesn't mean that it can be done, but it becomes challenging. But if you remember that the best way to do that is to belong to a research team. There are so many research teams in Nigeria right now. Ours happen to be one that is, we make it open to everyone in Nigeria, irrespective of your institution, irrespective of where you're coming from. Sometimes we actually have people from outside of Nigeria. We now have people from Kenya who join our research group. So we have opened it up more to actually anywhere in Africa where your interest is in research and developing research in Africa. So there are many more groups like that you can join, but I think the first step for you will be to join a research group so you can see people that come in with complementary skills and you can develop your transferable skill and learn from those skills. So I hope that's helpful for you. We did put in an email address on the chat box for you so that you will be on the mailing for us in terms of the things we discuss every month when we bring someone to speak here. But also we have a YouTube also there so that you can see past presentations that we have had, and also we can answer your questions. That email is just put again in case you missed it. Thank you.
All right, so let's take a couple more here. Are the activities in research administration general, or is it specific to funding agencies like the NIH? There's a general body of knowledge in understanding what kind of goes into research administration, and then folks start to specialize in knowledge either in agencies or in types of agreements, because, the NIH does have a specific way that they're going to operate, as opposed to, say, nonprofit agencies, as opposed to for-profit companies and industry. And so that knowledge can become specified, but it typically starts general, and then depending on the portfolio of research or the types of agreements you're typically working with, it will become more specified over time. How do you make yourself passionate about research? Okay, this one's great. And I'm going to segue this one into the other one about how to get someone to train in research management. How do I become passionate about research? Well, let's use the example of HIV in Nigeria. So to me, when I was visiting in Enugu and we had the opportunity to go to a baby shower, and there were all these great kids running around and all these mamas that are excited about their babies. And as a mother, I look around and I say, how heartbreaking knowing that some of these people have HIV, or some of these mothers have the potential to pass HIV on to their children. And to me, research can intervene. Research can provide a solution. And even if it can stop the transmission of one person, one child from getting HIV, to me, that's a benefit. That's a win. So when I look at that, to me, it's not even about the scale. It's just about the difference that it can make for one person. And I think that's so beautiful. And when I think I'm not a researcher, I'm not going to be sitting in the lab developing vaccinations. I'm not a clinician. I won't be there delivering medications, but I'm an administrator and I can do paperwork like nobody's business. That is my role. I get to help contribute indirectly to hopefully making the world a better place, and not just the world in the abstract, but actually in the people that we know in our community. I saw this when we had the COVID-19 pandemic. I was never so proud to work at UC San Diego, knowing that our researchers were some of the researchers behind vaccination development. And that was very real and was impacting everyone in my community. And knowing that we had some of the best and the brightest who were solving that problem and who were going to deliver us from that pandemic made me feel so proud to be part of that. So that's how I find the passion. To me, it's very real problems that we see every day. And I believe wholeheartedly that research can solve it. And by working indirectly in administration, since I'm not a doctor, not a nurse, I'm not a teacher or a researcher, that to me is fantastic. And then how do you get someone to train in research management? Well, there could be a couple of opportunities. I will invite the CTR crew to put my email address in the chat. You can reach out to me directly. There may be some opportunities that we can involve them in Nigeria. So that would be a good place to start. There are also some resources that can be available online if you're just interested, or contact me and I'd be happy to connect you with additional opportunities based on your situation. Let's see, I know we are at time, but let's see if we have any other questions. And do you need to have a research administrator to be part of your team to be considered for an NIH grant? I'm not sure I totally understand the question. I'm not sure if I will totally answer this, but I will give it a try. So in terms of research administration, it's not prohibitive in the sense if you don't have a research administrator, you can still apply to the NIH, you can still apply for funding, but typically any application going to the NIH or the US federal government agencies, that even if you get that money is typically awarded to institutions. It's not awarded to individuals. And if that money is awarded to an institution, you typically need someone who is serving in that capacity, whether they are designated as a research administrator or not. You need someone who is going to administer the grant, who's going to make sure that there's that management. It's easier if you have administrative folks who are dedicated to it, but it's not a requirement, especially as we're still building capacity, but it's certainly helpful.
So I just wanted to add to that.
Able to answer those.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that to say that for the grant administrator, you actually don't have to have that as a team member to write application. But I can assure you that without that, you're unlikely going to be able to submit your grant because most of the investigators don't know how to do it. So the grant administrator does not only work when you got the grant, they actually work before you get the grant. So I'll give you an instance. We had to build up a grant administrator team preliminary, people who can be able to put together. For 5 years, they were submitting grants before we got one. So there is those costs to it in terms of doing that, having people who can submit the grant, because you can write your grant, you can do all of that, but there is somebody who is dedicated to understand what is required. If any of you have submitted the NIH grant, there is really a process to do that correctly. So one of the things we have done is actually to have an opportunity to become a grant management for many people who want to do research. So that shouldn't be a barrier for you. So if, for example, your institution does not have the grant management capacity, we can do that grant management for you because of the training that we have invested in over these last 5 years of people who know how to submit those grants, not only in knowing how to submit them, but if we get them, which is a lot of the emphasis we're working with UC San Diego, how do you manage them appropriately? Wrong management of grants can get you into trouble. It is not the same type of grant that you used to know. These are different grants. Grants are not given to an individual. So you are not going to get the money in your pocket. The money is going to be given to an institution, and that institution will manage it. You are not going to get an NIH grant that is given to you. If that is your plan, this is not where to apply for. You go find some foundation that may sometimes give it to an individual, but even them, unlikely. So why do they do that? They want an institution that can have grant management and administration capacity to make sure that the rules they put down are followed, to make sure there are compliance with the rules, to make sure there is financial compliance, to make sure that conflicts, all the things that need to be done are done. We are having that particular area where we're going to conflict and people are like, oh my God, really? I have to disclose all of this? Yes. You have to disclose all of this. If you don't disclose them, it gets you in problem. It gets your institution in trouble. So the good news here is that if your institution does not have that grant management capacity, we can act as your grant management office and help you both in submitting the grant when you're submitting, but also in managing the grant if you receive them. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and I know we're at time. There was one final thing I just wanted to address, which there was another question. It was like, how do you kind of keep your motivation in the day-to-day when it just feels like it's all coming at you? And that's the thing with research administration, because there's so many different things you have to know, so many different deadlines you have to juggle, so many tasks you have to do, it can be a challenge in the day-to-day to remain motivated and to not lose steam. But this is where I think the power of community is so important. You know that you have a whole community of research administrators who can empathize, who know what you're going through, who can share their best practices, their tricks, their tips, so you can become more efficient in your role. And then, it doesn't feel as overwhelming. But also, again, kind of pulling it back to the passion, which I hope, if I've done nothing else today, I hope you walk away with some pride, some enthusiasm, and filled with some hope that research administration and research really do change the world. It is the stuff that actually changes the world. And anytime that I struggle to be motivated, because any job you work will have its down days. It will have the days that feel like a slog, that feel awful. But whenever I have those down days, I do remember what my role contributes to. And it does contribute whenever I see the output of a new vaccination, whenever I see a new health therapy, whenever I see that, there are different scientists who are trying to address, social equality, I know that my role is important. And so I hope that helps you keep some perspective, because if you look around your community, I think you would find a lot of ways that research can directly contribute. And so the more that we support it, the more we should be able to benefit. So thank you all so much for having me. You have my email address. Please do reach out, because now we're part of a community together. And I really I'm excited to see where Nigeria goes over the next 5 years, 10 years. And I hope that I get to witness all of that journey. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll be back next time when we ask you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. For everyone else, please, we bring in people every month. So if there are areas that you would like us to bring someone, please let us know. Use the email we put in the asset here at email. The email is there for you so that we can manage the things that you need. And when those lectures that we have monthly, they're all available in our YouTube channel, which is also on the chat box. So you can go there to listen to this one, but also previous ones we do every month. Next month, we are bringing in a speaker to talk about pathways in medicine. We realize that there are different pathways people don't know about. It used to be that if you're in healthcare, you have to be only patient related. Here, we are looking into different areas people can go in. One of the things we'll be talking next month is Dr. Bilikis, who is a physician, but who have taken a different pathway as bioinformatics. So she is working as a bioinformatics with the United Health, which is the largest healthcare system in the world. And you will be able to see how you can, again, the same thing we're talking about, transferable skills. The majority of when you have an education that gives you only specific skills, that education becomes limited because when things change in that field, you also go away. I see a question they are talking about, I want to do operational research. How can I do it when money for HIV is going down? But then money for HIV may be going down, but you see money for non-communicable diseases going up. Does operational skill work there? Yes, it just depends on your transferable skills. Pay attention to your transferable skills. The idea of taking a note and taking a pencil and just learning about specific skills to your profession is not in this day and age. There are things that are very specific. I say one of the first things to learn is to learn how to use Excel. Why? You can use Excel in every profession. How to use Word document, how to, those are skills that are transferable. They are not specific to your profession, but they support every profession. So look in your training and develop skills. The degrees in this world and age are not as important as they used to be. I have a PhD, I have an MD. It's not important as much. Why? Because you need this skill set. Because with that skill set, you're able to move around what you want to do. You are a doctor, but you have an interest in biostatistics. You go to biostatistics. You're a doctor, you have an interest in operational research. You go to operational research. You're a nurse and you want to, focus on grant management. You go to grant management and administration because we've seen that you can come there from every different specialty. So what I want people to remember that we bring this in is how to develop your transferable skills. Those are the things that are important. List them out. The ones you don't know, seek them out and learn them. They will help you a lot more in this economy where people are moving from everything to everything. Hopefully that these things we do every Monday make an impact. And if you do, visit our website and give us a little bit of a thumbs up. Go to the videos and give us a little bit of a thumbs up. We are doing this at no cost and at no funding from our government or any government. So all we get is the support for you to say that what we're doing is making a difference, and we would like to hear back from you. And thank you for joining us today. Bye, everyone.